Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cheryl Kubiak, and I am the Dean of the School of Social Work at Wayne State University. And I'm thrilled to invite you all to this wonderful lecture and panel discussion that we have for this afternoon. This is our Edith Harris Memorial Lecture. And the Edith Harris Lecture has been hosted every year at Wayne State University School of Social Work since 1987. This endowed lectureship was made possible through the generosity of Mort Harris and the Harris Foundation to honor Edith Harris, Mort Harris's wife, who was a graduate student in the School of Social Work at Wayne State from 1966 to 68. And had a very untimely death. So this endowed lecture was set up in her honor. And so we continue to honor her and be grateful for the Harris Family Foundation and their support. As Betsy's put in the chat around the CE credits, please make note of that if you're here for continuing education credit. I'd like to introduce the host of the lecture today, and that's Dr. Richard Smith. Dr. Smith is a professor within the School of Social Work and is also our Associate Dean for Research and Director of the Center for Social Work Research here in the school. He is also a core advisor for the International EcoCity Standards Project of the EcoCity Builders Incorporated. And he serves on the steering committee of Hope Village in Detroit and the Urban Learning and Leadership Collaborative. Rick is a vital part of our School of Social Work and one of the brainchild. This is his brainchild, I should say, this lecture. So Rick, without any further ado or embarrassment to you, I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much, Dean Kubiak. I would like to thank the Social Entrepreneurship Committee. Many are on this call: Mary Jo Upshaw, Lawrence Robinson, Chantalia Johns, our student representative, Tomika. And then we have community members too. I bring that up because we will be hosting the second event in the series, the 2022 Social Entrepreneurship Conference, Social Entrepreneurship in Action, Advancing Food and Environmental Justice Through Social Innovation and Enterprise. And that will be at the Mike Ilitch School of Business on Friday, December 2nd, 9 to 4. In March, the third event in our lecture series will be a call to action, a fight for environmental justice in Detroit. And that will focus on water justice and climate action. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of my favorite professors, Michael Spencer. Now, I never actually had him in class, but he, I think, started at Michigan when I was getting my MSW. Now, currently, he is Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Presidential Term Professor at the University of Washington. He's also Director of the Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and Oceania Affairs at the University of Washington Indigenous Wellness Research Institute. And this is such an important institute in social work at the University of Washington, and it's probably unique in Turtle Island, North America. He also holds adjunct appointments at the School of Public Health, in the Departments of Global Health and Health Systems and Population Health, and is a faculty research affiliate with the Center for Studies in Demography and Ecology. So his research examines health equity and wellness for populations of color, more specifically Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. He's focused on interventions that promote health through promote health among Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders through indigenous practices and values. He accomplishes this through community-based participatory research methods and has been an inspiration for me in particular. While conducting community-based participatory research in Detroit, he served as principal investigator of the Reach Detroit Family Intervention, a project which aimed to promote healthy lifestyles among patients with type 2 diabetes using community health workers. These were culturally tailored interventions designed for African American and Latinx residents in 2 Detroit communities. Thank you very much, Dr. Spencer, for joining us. We look forward to your presentation. Now, we will have breakouts afterwards, and I will introduce the breakout leaders after your lecture and after Q&A. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you so much. Let me just say, first of all, thank you so much. It's just such an honor to be here, Dean Kubiak and Dr. Smith. Yes, Rick and I go back a long way, you know, and I think that even though I didn't have Rick as a student in class, we kind of knew each other because we were active in social justice issues, and always knew he was going to go on to do great things, and you know, always really proud whenever I see him. So you know, one of the reasons I'm proud is because I think my career at the University of Washington is actually pretty new. It's really only about now 4.5 years old. I was at Michigan for 23.5 years. So, you know, the majority of my research, the majority of my career was done right there in the city of Detroit. You know, my adopted city, my adopted home for about 23 years before I recently moved back to the West Coast. One of the reasons I moved back to the West Coast, well, I had a lot of personal family reasons in particular that I moved back. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, so it was a step towards getting closer to home, but also an opportunity to work with my own community, which is a community that not only have I not really had the chance to work in because I do community-based participatory research. You know, you typically have to be present in order to do CBPR at a specific location. But, you know, I also really wanted to see how I could grow myself doing research with my own community. Sort of as an insider / outsider at this point in my career, you know, which I think is one of those things that's super important when we think about all of these, you know, when we think about CBPR. But today's talk is going to be a little different. It's actually going to be more about some of the work that I've been doing in Hawaii, probably for the last 5 to 7 years or so. I originally started, you know, my transition to the West Coast by taking a sabbatical, where I started to do some CBPR work in Hawaii and started to develop some connections. And there are several projects that I became involved with, and I want to share with you today. You know, my work in Detroit was primarily around the issue of diabetes, you know, and type 2 diabetes. We developed lifestyle interventions that not only looked at healthy food and healthy eating, but also physical activity. Within those interventions, we did develop, for example, some of the first mini markets in Southwest Detroit. We created a number of different community gardens, both on the east side of Detroit as well as Southwest Detroit, and we provided services to about thousands of individuals through our community health worker research. But, you know, one of the things that has always been a concern whenever working in communities, and especially communities of color and low-income communities, is the fact that these communities oftentimes are sort of vulnerable to structural oppression, and structural oppression sort of kind of, you know, it can hit in many different ways. You know, obviously there's housing security, there's just, you know, joblessness or underemployment. But, you know, something that we don't think about probably enough is food. Because food is not just our sustenance as far as life is concerned, but we also have relations with food. many different types of relations. And, I know that people from different cultures, one of the first things that they often associate with their culture is oftentimes food. So food is also, not only sustenance, food is also culture. Food is also medicine. Many of the foods that we eat are things that we actually use to generate medicine. Metformin, which is one of the most prescribed drugs in the world, actually comes from a plant. And a lot of people just assume that these things are just chemically synthesized, but they actually, and they are, but they originally come from a plant. And so these are some of the ways that I've been starting to rethink the idea of food, rethink the idea of food justice, and rethink the ways in which we do interventions for healthy lifestyles. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will get started with our presentation. Okay, can you all see my screen well? Great. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see chat or notes or things of that nature, but maybe someone can, unmute and let me know if there's something that I need to address. So to begin with, I just, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation here. And, I want to just talk to you a little bit about some of the issues that I have worked on and some of the ways in which we've developed interventions that were both culturally grounded as well as land-based to address issues of food justice. Before I sort of jump into the content of my presentation, I do want to acknowledge the land that I stand on today and that I work on, as well as the land I live on, and that is the lands of the Lushootseed speaking people, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Suquamish, Snohomish, Tulalip, Puyallup, as well as other Coast Salish people, and that I am committed to creating space for Indigenous and BIPOC communities through my mentorship, teaching, research, and service, and something that I am very committed to. So before I sort of jump into some questions about food justice, I always do a little bit of a quiz, okay? And the reason I do this quiz is just to get a sense of what people know about Hawaii, because that does impact sort of how you understand what the problems and what the issues are. So we'll just start off by looking at this. This the sort of the quiz is, what is indigenous to Hawaii? Okay, and the first picture you see is a pineapple. Okay, you can keep it to yourself. Okay, but pineapple indigenous or not to Hawaii? Yay, nay? The answer is nay. It is not indigenous to Hawaii. The pineapple is actually a plantation crop that was brought to Hawaii in order for capitalist business industries. The seal. Is a seal indigenous to Hawaii? Think about it, right? Don't seals live in cold climates? Yeah, got blubber and all of that. Well, this is actually a seal that is indigenous to Hawaii. It is the Hawaiian monk seal. So we actually have seals in Hawaii that are indigenous and live on the islands, live around the islands. Ukulele translates actually the traditional, the ukulele translates to jumping flea in Hawaiian. Ukulele, not indigenous to Hawaii. Ukulele is Portuguese. The guitar is Spanish, brought to Hawaii by Portuguese plantation workers who were actually brought in to be in many cases to be Luna, to be the bosses. But they brought the ukulele, and then Hawaiians mastered the ukulele. So we are affiliated. We play it as well as anyone, but we didn't invent it. Surfing. Yes, indigenous to Hawaii. We were surfing. In fact, when Captain Cook first pulled into Kealakekua Harbor, they noted people surfing, and people were actually surfing throughout the Pacific. Macadamia nuts. Yes, right. Gotta be. I mean, you buy them all the time when you go home, right? Everybody buys macadamia nuts to take home. Even they even sprinkle with Maui onions, right? Well, my onions are not indigenous either, nor are macadamia nuts. They're a crop that actually is from New Zealand. We do not grow cacao either. We do grow cacao today, but cacao is not indigenous. So your chocolate covered macadamia nuts or your macadamia nuts with Maui onion and garlic, neither is garlic. That's not indigenous either. So none of what you see on the screen right here is actually indigenous to Hawaii. Okay, this one should be easy, right? Waikiki Beach. Waikiki Beach. Indigenous to Hawaii. How can it not be indigenous? It's land, for goodness sakes, right? Well, Waikiki Beach is actually was a marsh, and it was filled in by dredgers that needed to do some landfilling, and then sand brought in from Manhattan Beach, California. So the sand actually erodes, and more sand has to be brought in. But no, the white sands of Waikiki Beach are not indigenous to Hawaii. They're indigenous to California. So that's our little Hawaii lesson for the day. How did you all do? You know, and there's reasons, right, that we don't know these things, right? I mean, and you know, one of the reasons that I'm going to postulate is because of our colonial history, with the United States in particular, but also with other European countries. And so it sort of brings to light the whole issue of, what is social work and what is culture? What do we really know about people? What do we know about cultures? And how we go about our work, and I just want to start by reminding us that social work is a Western invention, but it's often taught as if our methods are culturally neutral. And that's problematic, because when that happens, we run the risk of implementing interventions that are not a cultural fit, and that there's missed opportunities as a result. And in the words of Aponte, we must remember our ultimate goal as social workers when we do interventions is to serve and not to colonize. So, I'll speak a little bit more to Hawaii and our history, but I do want to start by just giving a few sort of background statements. So I think that we have ample evidence today, and I think social work has been on the forefront with our research in terms of the impact of our social environments. More and more research, I think, is even going further than just our social environments and looking at our physical environments, the places that we actually live, work, and play, and that these things have impacts on both our health and our well-being. Evidence is also conclusive that the distribution of factors that impact health are not equally distributed in our population. And in fact, there are several things that relate specifically to our environment in which impact is unequally distributed. The first being in the area of environmental justice, the unequal distribution of toxins and air and water quality in poor and BIPOC communities. Neighborhoods and communities that have unequal budgets in terms of their schooling, unequal amenities, access to nature, urban blight. A lot of this, we're very familiar with in Detroit, as well as here in Seattle. Relocation. We're seeing more and more relocation of communities, and not necessarily the kind of forced relocation that we've seen in the past, but we've seen climate refugees in terms of people whose island communities in the Pacific, for example, are disappearing. This more recently, I think in the past month, there was an island in one of the island chains of the Hawaiian archipelago actually no longer exists. It is completely submerged. So the reality is there are places in which people need to move. New Orleans and the tribes, the Homa tribe, are dealing with some of these issues as well. Marshallese and islands in Micronesia are disappearing by the year. So these are important issues, and we have these issues to deal with as far as relocation. Contamination and pollution, just generally an issue. I'll say more about that. And then finally, sort of the exploitation, extraction, and destruction of resources that comes with not just with industrialization and capitalism, but with our current colonial history, but also our contemporary actions as far as colonizing. And I just, want to point out one example because, and I'm not trying to be extremist here, but this is actually real. The detonation of 23 nuclear weapons by the United States within the time between 1946 and 58 on Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands that has led to a compact with Marshallese people at a federal level because of the destruction not only of their homelands, but the contamination of their homelands. And I want to show you an actual photo of Bikini Atoll to show that, yeah, it's not a myth. This actually did happen and does happen. In my own homeland of Hawaii, which I think sometimes people think are immune to some of these issues because, well, by goodness sakes, we're a paradise, we're a top vacation spot, we're every honeymooner's dream. But even in Hawaii, we suffer from these kinds of issues. I want to start with the image on the top right, which is the big water pool, because I've used that in the past as my background. And people's first comments is, wow, that is so beautiful. And I say, yeah, it is. It's interesting how beautiful nature is and how resilient it is, because this is from the impact of a 500-ton bomb that was used to simulate a nuclear explosion on the island of Kaho'olawe, which is one of the 9 main islands of Hawaii. So, this is the island that George Helm, who unfortunately passed away as part of trying to save Kaho'olawe, that he looked at from the shores of Maui as he watched the bombing and felt the ground tremble beneath his bare feet. It's disastrous, really. To the left here is actually one of the newest things that's happening. The Navy has a base in Red Hill, which is in the vicinity of Pearl Harbor. And they have a ton of fuel storage tanks there. Well, those storage tanks have been leaking into the aquifer for quite a while, and no one has, and there's been a lot of denial about it, a lot of inaction about it, but finally it became public, and the impact really is about, it's almost about half of the island of Oahu, which is our most populous island, with about 1 million people on one island. So the implications for our water is very, very tenuous right now. There is cleanup happening, but it took a long time for that to happen. And a lot of people have been drinking contaminated water. And unfortunately, it's not just in local families, it's not just Hawaiian families. This was a lot of military families as well, so the vulnerability doesn't just, it goes beyond, right? I mean, this is the kind of things that impact a lot of people. The bottom left, this is the Waianae Coast. This is an area where most of a large group of our Hawaiian population live. And as you can see, it also is the home for, power plants, H plants, and other industrial complexes, landfills, and such. And then finally, on the bottom right, I don't know how much of this, sort of got to Michigan, but the one of the highest peaks on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island, is Mauna Kea, and Mauna Kea is revered as the home of our God, and unfortunately, there's already 13 telescopes built on the peak of Mauna Kea, and the plan is to actually put the largest telescope in the world, that it's called the TMT, the 30-meter telescope, which would be the biggest telescope in the world on top of Mauna Kea. And I think the people have had enough of that. They're like, no more. We don't want any more telescopes on our mountain, and have actually been protesting for, it's going on probably about 4 years now. Still no telescope. So that's a nice thing that we see happening. Very galvanizing event for Hawaiian people. So I'll kind of get back into a little bit of the literature here. So again, there is a growing evidence of the link between how the environment impacts our health and can actually promote our well-being. In Hawaii, we use the word aina for land. So some of the words that you see here are in the Hawaiian language. Aina, or land-based models of practice, can also promote wellness, that there's growing evidence that these kinds of interventions are helpful as far as promoting wellness. Links to values such as responsibility, justice, and the interconnectedness with people and the environment are oftentimes keys to these types of interventions. We also are seeing just general research from the general sciences that just contact with the environment can promote our health. Going out, taking a walks, having a breath of fresh air, that all of these things can promote our health as well as our happiness. And then finally, just the interconnectedness, that can lead to action to promote environmental well-being. Is what we really are hoping happens as a result of these interventions. I'll just say a couple of words about food justice, okay? I want to just start off by defining it. And food justice ensures the universal access to nutritious, affordable, culturally appropriate food for all, while advocating for the well-being and safety of those involved in the food production process. And I believe this comes from Terra Madre and those folks, the food sovereignty people. Food justice closely intertwined with environmental justice and our sustainability movements, as you can imagine. And that for Native Hawaiian people, the interconnectedness with our environment allowed us to sustain ourselves on the islands of Hawaii for more than 100 generations. Right now, the amount of food that's produced in Hawaii that stays in Hawaii is about, well, actually it doesn't even stay in Hawaii. The amount of food produced is about 20%. Most of that doesn't stay. About 90% of the food is imported into Hawaii, which is very odd considering that we can grow just about anything there. A little bit more about Native Hawaiians, because I think understanding a little bit more of our history is useful. So as I had said, we provided food for what was estimated at the time, and this was based on some of Captain Cook's voyages and their estimates of population, estimated anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million inhabitants on the islands of Hawaii. The current population of Hawaii is about 1.5 million. So just to give you a sense that there were almost as many people on those islands then as there are now. About 50 years later, by the time of the first census, the population of Native Hawaiians were down to about 32,000. So you're talking about mass depopulation, massive depopulation from a number of reasons. Smallpox and measles were a big part of it. Also, the intensification of warfare due to more lethal weapons being introduced. Dispossession of land. Land was something that was not owned. Hawaiians had their own system of land management, which was replaced by capitalist land concept of land ownership, which led to the depossession of land by Native Hawaiian people. Water diversion from those ancestral farms that Native Hawaiians did live on and still live on today have led to rich valleys becoming dry forests, as well as a commercialization of land, whether that be for plantation crops or for other types of large agriculture. Traditional foods had become less available. There were less people able to produce that food for the people who were there. And then the introduction of new diets. All of these things have led to increasing levels of concentrated poverty, as well as instability in food and other necessities. Many of our Native Hawaiian populations are today located in food deserts, and as I had mentioned, most of the food is shipped in today. Food insecurity. So just a quick definition here, but it is actually something that people measure. So household level conditions of limited or uncertain access to adequate food, lack of money or other resources. For example, some of the questions that we might ask when we're addressing food insecurity is, did you have enough money to, purchase food? Did you have to cut back on food or not eat in order to have enough food? So things of that nature. But it's a pretty widely studied social determinant of health that we know is associated with a number of health conditions, poor self-management of chronic disease, as well as negative health behaviors. In Hawaii, we actually see pretty high rates, significantly higher than whites, of about 27% in terms of food insecurity. But I also want to point out that Native Hawaiians are not the only people in Hawaii who suffer from food insecurity. As you can see, Filipino and other Pacific Islanders actually have much higher rates, often due to their more recent immigration into the islands. Here's another really crazy statistic that 48% of Hawaii's families, regardless of race or ethnicity, have families that report food insecurity. And it has been noted, and I think that we're seeing this more, that especially among indigenous people who have been dependent upon or have strong links to land and water are often at the greatest risk of food insecurity. So now I want to sort of shift gears a little and talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've been working on and how I promote food justice and environmental justice through some of the interventions that I do. Let me start off by I should have probably deleted this slide, but that's all right. Well, I'll just talk about it really quickly. So what is culturally grounded research, and how does it differ from other things that we know of? Well, I think cultural sensitivity is oftentimes where people first begin when they're thinking about culture. And I think in that case, they're trying to not assign a value to the culture. It's not right or wrong, but it's more culturally neutral, that things are sort of culturally neutral. You kind of control for culture, but you're sensitive to the differences that exist within people, and you don't put value on it. Culturally tailoring is when you take something that's already sort of evidence-based, and then you make those changes that focus on that community or that population in which you wish to serve. culturally grounded research is a little different from those two models in the sense that we really start by centering our research on cultural practices, values, and norms that already exist within the community. So in many cases, for myself, I'm not developing interventions. I'm looking for what interventions already exist within the community. What are people doing that are already that works? Culturally grounded research also intentionally deconstructs and challenges stereotypical messages of BIPOC communities, connects individuals with their cultural roots, explores what members have in common, not just in terms of our past and our present, but the dreams for our future. Helping people become aware of their identity and learning more about their cultural background, as well as being a resources from their culture that can be used creatively, yet respectively, and not be appropriated. Similarly, but also different, land-based research is an area which has been, I think, really taking off in indigenous communities in particular. But it's a form of sort of culturally grounded research that is also rooted in the values, but those relationships, I mean, those values being the relationship between people and land, the respect for land, our responsibility towards sustaining the land, which is what we call malama. This includes not just reconnecting with our land, but restoring our land. Restoring our practices, restoring our ceremonies. Unfortunately, because of colonization, we have seen a growing disconnection between people, indigenous people and their lands. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we really try to do is to see what we can do. The other sort of theoretical frame that we kind of borrow from is the indigenous paradigm. In this case, Sean Wilson's work, where he talks about the indigenous paradigm comes from this fundamental belief that knowledge is relational. It's shared with all creation, and therefore it can't be owned or discovered. Indigenous research methods should reflect these beliefs as well as the obligations that they imply. And for me, they have actually tremendous obligations for myself. And, you know, I know for those of us that work in our own communities, we have our obligations as well, right? I mean, we always have those obligations to negotiate and those relationships to negotiate. You know, and this sort of speaks to this idea of decolonizing practice, the removal of the dominant norms on indigenous forces, undoing of colonialism, removal of the colonizer's idea that we are inferior, and that our ideas and that our wisdom is inferior. And it's also a political process, you know, and a rejection of the colonialist mindset and norms. And this kind of work takes a lot of practice. Takes a lot of practice because, you know, it's like the air we breathe, right? This is all the air we breathe. You breathe in, you breathe in and you breathe out colonialism. So to look beyond that, to remove those takes a lot of reflection. It takes a lot of hard work, but it is possible. Another framework that I use, and I won't go into the details of this, but I'll highlight this one in the middle here, Aina Momona, healthy lands, healthy people, the balance between life and nature. These were a set of values that we put together for our Native Hawaiian community to show how we define wellness for ourselves. So we talk about Ea, our own self-determination, having control of our lives and our future. You know, being in balance with nature and being in balance with people, the quality of our relationships, the extent to which we support each other, vai, shared wealth, seeing value in everyday things, oiwi, knowing who you are, where you come from, and then finally kelkuamana, spirituality or belief in a higher power. So I'm going to start by telling you this first story, okay? This guy in the middle here is Eric Enos, or Uncle Eric to many. And he was one of those individuals in the 1970s that was really upset, okay? He was upset because what you see on the top right corner of this is what we call the Waianae Valley. Okay, and the Waianae Valley is an area where most of a lot of our Native Hawaiian homestead lands are in terms of the island of Oahu. Well, there's 3 streams that flow from the top of the mountains to the bay at the bottom of the valley. And those 3 streams not only are important to our history, our stories of place, but they're important because they produced kalo or taro, which is the staple of our food. So you see how taro is grown. It's grown in these, it's grown in these ponds. So you need water. You must have water, flowing water. So 3 of those streams that flowed through the Waianae Valley were diverted to the other side of the island. They were capped by the border water supply and were sent to Schofield Barracks, which is Army base, as well as to water sugarcane and pineapple, as well as golf courses and watering of resorts, providing water for resorts, as well as other forms of tourism. In 1972, Eric Enos and a group of other young Hawaiians hiked to the top of Mount Ka'ala and rediverted one of the streams back into the Waianae Valley and started uncovering these ancient taro patches. What he found was the whole valley was terraced. The entire valley was terraced. So he just took back one sliver of it. And the border water supply, obviously, and the state of Hawaii tried to remove him. But what they relied on a federal law that says if indigenous people are practicing their culture, in which he was practicing his culture, that they can't bother him. And so he has since turned this into the Ka'ala Cultural Learning Center many years later. As you can see, student groups coming through, learning about kalo, planting kalo, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful spot, and a tribute to the kind of work that people are doing in Hawaii. I want to also highlight another group of people that I've been working with, and this is the Waimanalo Limu Hui. Limu is seaweed, is a Hawaiian word for seaweed. And what's very interesting is that seaweed grows in brackish water, okay? So that's important to know. What's brackish water? Brackish water is where the fresh water and the salt water meet together and they join together, okay? So what we have is, what we have here on the Waimanalo coast of Oahu is a place that used to have an abundance of seaweed, but no longer has seaweed. Many people blame the Hawaiian people for overpicking. All those Hawaiians overpicked the seaweed, and that's why there's no seaweed left. Other people blame the runoff from the road and this and that. Okay, the real reason is water was diverted from Waimanalo again. Okay, water was diverted for other purposes, and so the streams that flow into the ocean did not produce enough brackish water to grow limu. Okay, that being said, there's a group of people who are committed to bringing limu back to the shore. And one of the reasons why they're committed to it is not only because limu is a traditional food of ours, but it's also a medicine of ours. And so, it's important for us. We also noted that when we chose a place to do it, we also, to do the limu planting, we decided to do it at Pahonu, which is this ancient fish pond, which you see to your left here, that has, that we actually rebuilt. It had fallen into disrepair. There was just, sort of rock formations that were ancient rocks, but rebuilt it. Actually rebuilt it right in front of the newly the newly constructed Obama mansion. So I hope he appreciates us. I hope he appreciates the work we're doing. We might have Secret Service chasing us away in a while, but this is where we're planting our limu as well. We're planting, so every monthly, we go about 200 to 300 people gather, and we create these limu leis that we wrap around these rocks, and we plant those rocks into the pahono, into the fish pond, where they can propagate. So limu, guess what? Small fish eat limu, right? Little fish eat seaweed. And what do big fish eat? Little fish. So, this is all part of the, just part of our ancient system that we're trying to bring back. Here's some pictures here. You can see the people moving those rocks. You can see the seaweed leis that we make there. So again, it's just this idea of promoting healthy lifestyles, tied to these projects, or this concept of malama, or responsibility for taking care of the land. That's our responsibility. Promotes the value of pono, or justice, through the restoration of land. Reinforces the connections between land and people. Promote values of conservation and health. Promotes physical activity and health in culturally relevant ways. Enhances civic engagement and community empowerment through these processes as well. And finally, promotes community attachment, social support that can also improve emotional and mental health. Another project I'll finish on is we call it the Malama Project, which is short for the mini ahupua'a for lifestyle and mea'ai with aquaponics. So this is an aquaponics intervention. Ahupua'a, I'll explain in a moment. Mea'ai is healthy eating. This is our Malama crew, just to show you the variety of people who worked on this project. But I'll get to this, which is probably the thing to understand the most. So this is what we call an aquaponics system. An aquaponics system basically consists of a grow bed and a fish tank underneath. And what happens is fish poop, they create ammonia. Ammonia gets sent up through the filter, and it gets filtered through the lava rocks that are under here, as well as through the soil. Leaves nutrients behind for these plants, which then get filtered back as clean water for the fish. So it's a self-contained system. It is a great source of not just vegetables, but also fish. So you have protein. Actually, water is reused. So there's there's only evaporation that takes place. Your food is organic. They grow faster within an aquaponic system because of the nutrients. They grow bigger. And it's a great source of healthy eating. We base the intervention off of the concept of the ahupua'a. And the ahupua'a is the strip of land from the tip of the mountain to the first reef. So it goes even into the ocean, the first reef to the tip of the mountain. And the concept is everything you need to live a healthy life, all is contained within this ahupua'a system. That it too is a self-contained system. We have fish ponds for fish, the stream and the taro patches are where the irrigation, not only the irrigation, but the filtration occurs, So we use the idea of the ahupua'a to represent the aquaponic system. We also do a workshop, so we, not only do we create an aquaponic system for every family, but we also teach them about how to maintain it. La'au lapa'au is plant-based medicines. We teach them about that. Aipono, healthy eating, different kinds of foods. We do checking in, cooking demos, ahoike, where we do a presentation. At that, we'll see some of this in a minute. But this is some of the planting that has, people preparing their plants for the aquaponic system. Here's actually the build where people are building their aquaponic systems. You can see it's a family event. Everybody's doing it. And the other thing is it's interesting because at first everyone wanted to work on their own system. And we told them, no, you don't work on your own system. Everyone works on everyone's system. And, that created a completely different dynamic. You can see people installing their aquaponic systems in their home. This is just a quick time lapse of people building an aquaponic system, just so you see. Kids aren't really much help, as they're just playing in the water, but that's what the water is there for. And yeah, there you have the finished product. So in addition to the build out, we obviously do those workshops. This is the La'alapa'a workshop where we're making some medicines, as well as some creams and other things and tinctures. Here's people at the Hoike where we brought our bounties that we grew to share with one another. As you can see, quite a bounty. One of the competitions we had was who could make the best tilapia. So we had a tilapia cook-off. And so, as you can see from this intervention, there's a number of things that this intervention does that promotes health, besides obviously the healthy food, healthy eating, as well as traditional foods, traditional medicines. We also increase access to fresh food and fresh fish, thus hopefully reducing food insecurity. Promoting family support and attachment, this concept of ohana. Promoting community empowerment and social support, again, within the community. Promoting a sustainable, ongoing way of accessing food, as well as providing ongoing support for these aquaponic systems, because they do break. We do need to continue to help them. And then finally, promoting the interconnection between land and people, and promoting Native Hawaiian values of food justice and plant-based healing. Finally, I just want to end here with a couple of, we call them olelo no eau. And olelo no eau is just another word of saying, wise sayings. Okay, so the first one here is he ali ka aina, he kaua ke kanaka. The land is chief and people are its servants. So the idea is that, the land does not need us. Okay, in fact, as we saw from the pandemic, the land is better without us, And so the land is chief. They don't need us. We need the land. And therefore, we are its servants. Ka na'awao o na kupuna, ka lama e ho'oma lama lama, e ike ala no na keiki. That was a mouthful, huh? The wisdom of the elders is the torch that enlightens the path of the children. And part of why I included this is because, a lot of this work is really relying on our ancestral knowledge, that we are bringing forward here. We honor that knowledge. It is the light that guides us. And yeah, I think we remember the past in order to understand the present, but also to guide our future. And in these interventions, one of the things that I think was the biggest takeaway for me is when participants come to me and they say, wow, I didn't know our ancestors had such great wisdom. I didn't realize how much they knew, how much what they knew can change our world today. It just goes beyond that. Wow, they knew a lot, but that they may actually hold the secrets to how we can actually save our planet Earth and save ourselves as a human race. And with that, I say mahalo. No task is too big when done together by all, right? This is a big task, a big ask, but we can do it if we all work together. With that, I say thank you, and I'll stop for questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Spencer. For Q&A, I would like people to drop their questions in the chat. And then if you would like to speak, just put that in your question that you'd like to speak, and then I'll call on you and ask you to unmute. We did go one question already. Mike, are you willing to share the slides?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Betsy will post them to our website.
Yep. And you have them, I believe, right, Betsy?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. So while people are thinking, we're getting some love in the audience, in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Christina Beltran.
Oh, Christina.
Yeah, a ringer. Okay. I thought
it's actually funny because sorry to interrupt. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, Navy brat, so also love that you're so proud of Hawaiian culture. So it means a lot too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Most welcome. So while people are still thinking, you did talk about what social workers should know about food and health, and I think that's really what everyone should know about food and health.
Yeah.
Very connected. Maybe a little bit about labels. How to avoid labels, labeling, what kind of language when we're talking about our relationship to food and our bodies and our health. Do you have any insight, tips?
You know, I mean, the way that I've been conceptualizing, you know, issues of food is again, you know, I think when I first started doing my work with diabetes, a lot of it was focused on more how to eat healthy, right? You know, less carbohydrates, less this, less that. But I think what we forget is the meaning of food is just so important to think about when we're, you know, asking people, so to speak, to eat differently, right? I think a lot of people, especially, you know, and I find this true in many communities, is that, you know, the idea of eating healthy oftentimes is equated with eating white. That is, I think, what a big issue is, you know, and you know, in many cases, because we're not even attached to our traditional foods, we start to, like, you know, I love this story that Keawe Kaholakula, who's a researcher in Hawaii, he shares with me. He was doing an interview and they were talking about Spam. And I don't know if folks know, but Spam, Hawaii is like the most, like one of the states where Spam is like, has the highest level of consumption. And actually, Spam was exported to a lot of Asian countries. And so a lot of Asian countries love Spam. But this one guy said, you know, I can't stop eating Spam because Spam's my culture. I would say, oh, no, Spam is not your culture. You know, in fact, it's the very opposite, right? It's the colonizer's culture. It was brought to us, you know, as a ration. You know, a war ration, you know, which brought war to our land, right? You know, so, you know, I mean, it's the opposite, in fact, but so, you know, when so the labels are terrible, right? The labels that people put on us are terrible. I mean, many people, I think, you know, don't want to go to the doctor. I think this is also an issue, right? Yeah. Don't want to go to a doctor because they'll probably be shamed, you know, and that that happens so often. People are ashamed, they're told, number of different words. I don't want to repeat those words, but we know those words that we've all heard, that make us feel sad, make it feel more difficult, make it feel like a challenge. And then when the solutions being proposed are, well, go sign up for an aerobics class and eat more salad, my partner doesn't believe me, but she believes me because she knows my family. But I don't think I ate a salad till I was in like high school. We just didn't eat salad. That's not, and she's like, well, you don't eat vegetables? No, I eat vegetables. I eat different kind of vegetables. But the idea that I eat different kind of vegetables, right? That's not your vegetables is like a complete foreign concept, Oh yeah.
I was really excited when I saw the taro root.
Yeah. And so when you think about connection to life, health, and food, taro is a very good example. Okay, so taro is, like I said, it's our staple, right? It's like rice, bread, it's our staple. But taro is actually more than that. So if we go back into our creation story, okay, the first human being was Haloa, the first human, okay? But Haloa was born stillbirth. And so they planted Haloa, and Haloa became Kalo. So taro is my ancestor, the first human. When we trace our ancestry back to Haloa. That's the beginning, So taro is more than food. Taro is who we are. And so when efforts to by GMO companies to try to genetically alter taro came to Hawaii, Hawaiians were absolutely not. You will not modify our ancestor. And people were like, these folks are crazy calling taro an ancestor. But it is what it is. It is who Haloa is, and and it's who we descend from. So our connection with food is, goes back to the beginnings of antiquity.
This is generating a lot of conversation in the chat. One, spam is not a part of the traditional culture, but culture over time is an evolving thing, like the ukulele, for example. Has it not been integrated in?
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, spam is like you say, like the ukulele. It's something that was introduced and has become sort of something that we associate with our culture, right? But that's where the problems can come into play, because when these associations tend to be negative associations, right? When we associate our culture with negative things that are not a part of our culture, then we can more easily reject them or accept them on our terms. We can accept them on our terms.
Our next question. In what ways does policy, such as food assistance, USDA funding, affect indigenous foodways in Hawaii?
Well, it certainly impacts it quite a bit, and I think that we are more than grateful for those food policies, and I think that they've been very good. Hawaii has done, I think, quite well as far as the SNAP, the WIC, and the growth of farmers markets and things of that nature. But it doesn't necessarily reach out to these rural communities, and especially where the majority of Hawaiians live. The farmers markets, as much as they provide lower cost fruit and vegetable, they offer coupons. You don't see a lot of poor people going to farmers markets because they tend to be in town. not in their own communities. But that was one of the things that we tried to do, right? So with our work in, for example, in Detroit, you know, putting these fresh food markets, working with the Black Farmers Association, and that's actually what I'm doing here in Seattle, also working with the Black Farmers Association with their Yesler community garden as well. Here in Seattle, we have several wonderful community gardens here, and you know, that's a great place to cultivate a lot of this stuff, right? Because you know, I've been sort of focusing on traditional foods, but it's not that, you know, even today, I mean, we all eat a smorgasbord of a diet, you know, we don't just eat food from our own culture. We in fact, we enjoy eating food from other cultures, you know, and I think that that's also a beautiful thing because, you know, in these community gardens here, you have Black, Asian, Latino working community garden together, sharing, oh, what do you use that vegetable for? What is that odd looking vegetable used for, you know, and such, and having those kind of conversations across race and across cultures that I think promote our own well-being as well.
That's a good point. That dovetails to another question we had. The program that you worked on in Hawaii, was that something people in the community were coming and asking for? Was it something that the group brought to the community, and how did this affect interactions with the community and the turnout of community members?
Yeah, so all of the interventions that I spoke about were all developed by community, for community. None of them were my creation. In fact, all of it was already existed in the communities when I got there. So the Cultural Learning Center, for example, you know, that has been there since the 70s. The aquaponics intervention, that there was a person in the community who had been doing aquaponics. She individually, as a person, one person, provided 80 families with aquaponic systems before we even found this person. And we're like, you want to do more? You know, do you want to develop an intervention around this, right? So what we structured were things like the workshops, you know, the data collection, obviously front and back end, but all in collaboration. So, you know, it was more of a matter of, you know, how can we help you, as opposed to, would you like to try something that we've developed? Same with the limuhui, that emerged, and the fish pond, that emerged from our CBPR process. So we did a, you know, community town halls, and we decided, you know, we asked community what were some of the priorities. Limu was a priority for the elders in the community. That was one of their top priorities. And so that's how we ended up creating the limuhui. And we actually didn't know, we knew nothing about seaweed, but we found out that there was somebody on the other side of the island who was replanting seaweed. They were propagating seaweed sort of like outside of the water, you know, in their own bins, kind of like an aquaponic system. They're growing seaweed and then replanting it. So that's where we got our seaweed from. We got it from them, and we learned about seaweed from them. So it was interesting, communities learning from communities, and now everyone's coming to Waimanalo to learn about seaweed on other islands, and everybody wants aquaponics, which is so cool. Even up here, some of the communities that I've interacted with and I've shared about aquaponics, they're like, how do we get it up here? And I'm like, well, it's a little bit more complicated because in Hawaii, you don't need the heat. You don't need to heat anything. Here, they won't, you know, the fish won't make it through the winter outdoors if it freezes. So you need different fish. Tilapia won't survive either.
Yeah.
Like trout, or, you know. Yeah, other question?
Yeah. You said there were food deserts. Do you think communities that do not have food scarcity are because of those communities are native to that community?
Yeah, I mean, the grocery stores tend to be the small family markets in those communities. They don't have the major Kroger or Whole Foods or things of
Yeah.
that nature that, that you would likely think, they're more, not necessarily bodegas, but I would say, small family-owned grocery stores that sometimes offer good produce, but it's expensive. It costs a lot more to get your food from somewhere like that than it does to get it from somewhere else. And the nice thing too about some of the work that we've been doing is we found is the food production is too much for one family. So people end up not only giving them away, but actually some people are selling it. So there's also a co-op, a local co-op in Waimanalo. And so some of the people have been actually selling their excess food for profit to the co-op, which is also nice, I also have a few people who have developed their own entrepreneurial businesses. So one person in particular now sells a whole line of Hawaiian plant-based medicines and tinctures. I know actually the healer who's at Waimanalo Center, at the health center, that's another project I've been involved with in Waimanalo, is the integration of Native Hawaiian healing methods in primary care. At Waimanalo Health Clinic, every Native Hawaiian person gets a primary care provider, a behavioral health provider, and a Native Hawaiian healer assigned to them at their beginning of their, intake.
Yeah.
And they can receive services from any of those three people throughout the time that they're in care. And that's been going wonderfully as well. That work's been going great.
Looks like we've got two more questions. One, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us as future social workers. What ways can we support the work of uncovering and elevating Indigenous ways?
I mean, it seems simple to say, but it's harder to do, and that is to learn more about the truth of what, I think learning about the history from an Indigenous perspective. I think our histories have been told by many people. James Michener made a ton of money off of our history, yet, who is telling our history? Who from our community is telling our story? And I think that that's the beauty of a lot of these interventions, is that these individuals are telling their story. And, not only that, but we've been so productive, and I have a community member who probably could go up for tenure. She's got so many publications and high impact journals, I mean, that's the kind of, but that, that's like, the icing on the cake, right? I think for me, the real impact is one, when you go out to those monthly limu plantings, and you see a couple hundred people from the community out there willing to engage in this activity. I mean, it's not just healthy as far as physical, it's healthy as far as mental, and it's healthy for you spiritually. It's all of those things. And spirituality, is defined by yourself. But for us, I look at it as, it's good soul work, right? As they say, right? It's work that's good for your soul. It makes you feel good from the inside out. That's, that's what I mean by spirituality.
like Grace Lee Boggs would say, these are times to grow our souls. And that reminds me of that image you had of people working in a community garden, coming from different cultures, different intersectionalities, experiences.
Yeah.
And some other questions. One, you sound familiar with Detroit. Did you see any food deserts here? A related question, what do we do to help communities with food deserts?
Oh, most definitely there are food deserts in Detroit, you know, and I know that these, you know, Detroit has, you know, gone through a lot of changes in the past decade or so, you know, but you know, and I think there's a lot of things that have changed, a lot of things that have improved, you know, but when you go to the neighborhoods, when you go to the west side, when you go to your Brightmoor, when you go to the east side, you know, yeah, there are still food deserts. There are still food deserts. You know, the trickle down hasn't trickled yet into those communities. They're still trickling up into downtown, you know, and until, you know, that flow comes back to the communities, we will see food deserts. But there's also great work that's being done. And I think, you know, I mean, one of my favorite places in Detroit is Eastern Market, right? I mean, it's probably one of everyone's favorite places in Detroit, right? It's someplace where we all can go, we all can buy our produce. And I think, you know, not only having, you know, not only promoting areas like Eastern Market, but let's have more than one Eastern Market, you know. I mean, let's have these in more areas, especially in these communities.
That's a good segue, Mike, because we actually have we're going to migrate into breakout rooms, and we're inviting you to float to different breakout rooms, and I think either Betsy or Andre will support you in there. And one of our breakout rooms is hosted by Julie Rice of the Hope Village Revitalization, and she is the market manager for a neighborhood level farmers market. Hope Village Revitalization is a community-led, community-driven organization whose mission is to move the Hope Village neighborhood forward in a way that mitigates disparities in wealth, privilege, and educational resources. Julie is a longtime Hope Village resident, and she's made significant contributions over the past years. And she is a collaborator of mine, been just amazing to work with. We also have a graduate of our program, former student of mine, Amy Kuras, the Research and Policy Program Manager. Oh, hi, Julie. For the Detroit Food Policy Council. The Detroit Food Policy Council aims to influence policy which ensures the development and maintenance of a sustainable and equitable food system, resulting in a food secure city of Detroit, in which all of Detroit residents are hunger-free, healthy, and benefiting from a robust food system. Amy came to us from journalism, said, I want to be a social worker, and the rest is history. We are also pleased to have Anjanette Davenport Hatter, the innovative founder and CEO at Harambee Care, an equity-based social work enterprise focused on professional and emotional wellness, and Your Good Village Collective, a nonprofit organization that aims to improve health outcomes. AJ served as a clinical social worker, a social justice and health equity leader. Through her advocacy efforts, she provides opportunities for community members to become educated about family safety and first food initiatives. She serves as commissioner with her community's Commission on Diversity and Inclusion. And she earned professional certificates from Harvard, University of South Florida, in strengthening community health workers and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, respectively. She holds a bachelor's degree from Michigan State in family and child ecology and a master's degree from the Wayne State School of Social Work. And last but not least, we have Danielle Todd, the executive director of Make Food Not Waste. Make Food Not Waste is a Michigan-based organization whose mission is to keep food out of landfills and slow climate change by creating lasting solutions to food waste through education, food upcycling, and advocacy. Well, thank you so much for attending the annual Edith Harris Lecture. I'd like to thank our keynote, Dr. Michael Spencer. I'd like to thank our 4 breakout leaders, AJ Davenport Hatter, Amy Kuras, Julie Rice, Danielle Todd. I would like to encourage you to come December 2nd, Mike Ilitch Business School, 9 to 4, Social Entrepreneurship Day on food justice. Yeah, thanks, Amy. You're with the Food Policy Council.